While most communities would be horrified by the concept of building houses on top of cemeteries, First Nations burial sites have frequently been destroyed by highways and housing.
People have always fought over land, who gets to have it and how they get to use it. Canada is the world's second biggest country by area, so there's no lack of conflict here. Tonight, we have two stories that may challenge your idea of property and who really owns it. First up, a high-stakes battle in BC. A developer bought a piece of land looking to make millions with a dream project, only to learn that a local First Nation believes the site is sacred. Duncan McCue takes you inside a ground war.
If you're driving through Abbotsford, it's easy to miss an empty field, a bunch of trees. But when the bank foreclosed on this property 3 years ago, local farmer and developer John Glazema was eager to buy it.
We were able to purchase it at, kind of 50 cents on the dollar, and so that was the starting point.
So this was a great investment.
Great investment.
For $10 million, Glazema and his partners became proud owners of 160 acres. And they had big plans. A mall where farmers could buy farm equipment and rustic homes with horse stables. A $40 million project, increasing the land's value tenfold. But
I was just talking with, actually with my mom this morning about the site, and she was saying, what do they want to do? And I told her, and she said, well, they can't do that.
little did Glazema know what he was getting himself into.
From the perspective of being a good neighbor, we want to, of course, respect your concerns. Do we want to resolve the situation? 100%. Is the clock still ticking? Yes. Significant value, significant interest costs? Yes.
Is it starting to add up?
Oh, of course.
He and his partners had no clue when they bought the land how important this place was to the Sumas First Nation.
It's an old sacred site to us that the old people used to tell us that these places need to be protected.
When they heard of the project, Dalton, chief of the Sumas, and archaeologist Dave Schaepe were dumbfounded.
All through the side of the property we're driving along now, the burial mounds that were identified here sort of start back up behind us and continue on all through the woods.
Straight across the road here.
A decade ago, Silver was blockading here, trying to stop a gravel company from building this road through the property.
They said they left a buffer zone around it, but to us that wasn't enough. We were told to stay away from there, and in the language of our old people, they said chits were there, which meant the spirits were there. And then we were told that there were a lot of our old people, the ancestors, were buried there.
To understand why ancestral spirits mean so much to the Sumas peoples of today, it helps to know the story of this rock. Long ago, elders say a shaman challenged the thunderbirds who lived on the mountain. In the ensuing battle, he was turned to stone and then shattered by a lightning bolt. Here he remains, a cautionary tale known as Lightning Rock. Much later, in 1782, the Sumas peoples living on the shores of Sumas Lake were infected by smallpox. 80% of the population died. The survivors brought their dead to high ground, to Lightning Rock, buried them in mounds throughout these woods. In the 1920s, the province drained the lake and parceled out land lots to farmers, ignoring the Sumas band and their graves. Now, what the Sumas people consider a sacred site and mass grave is also considered private property.
It was a bit surprising that, for one, a new property owner would have purchased this property without somehow having been made aware of what was recorded here a number of years ago as a result of an official assessment.
But not so surprising in BC, where protests like this keep on happening. In Vancouver, this battle erupted when a condo developer unearthed ancestral remains in an ancient midden, only resolved after 2 years when Musqueam First Nation bought the property. Near Salt Spring Island, First Nations and an Alberta businessman are still at odds after the BC government issued permits to build a luxury home on burial cairns. Why the conflict? The province keeps a registry of First Nation graves and spiritual sites. But that information isn't shown on land title documents when someone buys a property. There's no system to inform owners whose land is designated. Yet, buyer beware. It's owners who foot the bill for any archaeological assessments and risk large fines if heritage sites are destroyed. The minister responsible for heritage conservation says the system works fine.
Over 40,000 sites, over 350 permits approved each year, most without incident, and so we believe that it works.
Stop the racism! Stop the racism!
But there's a double standard, insist First Nations, if government keeps approving developments without First Nations consent. The opposition is calling for better protection of sacred sites.
While most communities would be horrified by the concept of building houses on top of cemeteries, First Nations burial sites have frequently been destroyed by highways and housing. It is wrong, Madam Speaker, and unacceptable.
They propose a fund to buy heritage lands. The response?
It would be very difficult to set up that fund. The process, as I said, the core principle is that the responsibility for the sites is the responsibility of the developer or the landowner.
That's what happened with John Glazema's Abbotsford property. The province green-lighted the project after he agreed not to break ground without consent from Sumas.
We've got basically the permit to move forward with our development. But you also need to be respectful of, the heritage claims. You want to be respectful of your neighbors. So we're in a bit of a quandary.
What's a costly conundrum for John Glazema is to the Sumas and Stalo peoples a much larger matter of historical redress.
This is our repository here at Stalo Nation.
The Stalo archaeology team has been busy reclaiming ancient history.
The site goes back over 5,000 years. This is yew wood with a cedar rope twisted around the top. It's from Sumas Mountain area.
To the Stalo, these artifacts are more than museum pieces.
It speaks to the history. The history is important, and the history of Sumas and Stalo continues to play a part in understanding how we get along together and resolve issues of land claims.
But nothing here as sensitive as this.
And this is a grave house. It's a burial house.
Inside, bones of 27 ancestors returned from museums, some over 5,000 years old. Here they rest until proper burial can take place.
The caretaking for the ancestors who have passed away is of utmost importance. And ancestors who have passed away continue to play a role in the community currently.
And hence some of the upset when they're not being treated.
Exactly.
That's why the Sumas peoples treat this area with reverence, insisting burial mounds here remain untouched.
And because of the gaps in the provincial system, we end up setting up the blockades, as Sumas has done in the past, as a means of, as a means of protection. When all of that can be avoided, in my opinion, all of that can be avoided if the province actually pays attention to this matter and stops using landowners and homeowners as shields between them and their obligation to deal with Aboriginal rights and title issues.
Frustrated by the province's response, Sumas takes the battle to a second front.
The applicant proposes to create a 5-lot bare land strata subdivision which will allow for the development of farm equipment sales, leasing and servicing center.
In order for the project to go ahead,
this subject site is going to support local farmers. It's going to keep iconic businesses in Abbotsford.
Glazema and his partners need rezoning approval from the city of Abbotsford.
And finally, most importantly, we will not proceed without the consent of the Semath Nation.
But Sumas First Nation has made its objections public. Citizens take notice.
And it's hard to think of a more significant cultural site than a mass grave that goes back to first contact.
Council reserves its decision.
And we're aware of course, the First Nation concerns, and we are respectful of that. So we're just we're hoping to move forward and find a solution to that after we've overcome this hurdle.
But weeks later, the city denies the rezoning, citing First Nations concerns. $40 million project quashed.
And they all signed a letter of intent. And
that leaves Glazema paying taxes and mortgage on land now difficult to sell. He wants compensation from the province.
At some point of time, there has to be a clear policy put into place. It's a huge liability. It's a huge liability for realtors, financial institutions, and property owners.
And if that doesn't happen in BC?
If it doesn't happen in BC, I'd suggest you be very, very cautious if you're purchasing any other property in BC.
For now, the collective costs of unresolved Aboriginal claims fall to unlucky individuals who have burials in their backyard. Duncan McCue, CBC News, Abbotsford.
So there's one ground war. Just ahead, Red Sharon has another.